I'm the executive director, the new executive director, I should say, with Animal Outlook. I'm here to welcome everyone to tonight's town hall event, an evening with Investigator Erin Wing. And I'm so looking forward to getting started in just a minute. It's the top of the hour, so I can see people are starting to join us now. I recognize some of these names. Angela, good evening. Elena, good evening. Jeannie, good to see you. Scott, Terry, great that so many people are joining. We had such a big sign up to this event that we're really excited to see who's able to join. So I just want to give people a couple, maybe a minute more to get logged in and get settled. So while I do, what would be lovely is if we want to make this event as interactive as possible. So if you would feel free to post in the chat where you're from, that would be really nice. So we can just kind of see where people are joining for us. We want to make it as interactive as possible. I know that Erin's talk is bound to bring up lots of emotions and thoughts, not to mention questions, which we'll get to at the end. So we want to have a lively discussion. So it'd be great to see all of that. Um, Colorado Springs, Jeannie, wonderful. Buckeye, Arizona. Hi, Grace. Good to see you. Um, so as we have 24 racking up, great. I'll jump into it then. Seattle, Bob, good to see you. So I think we can get started. So first, just a few housekeeping items. As always, I mentioned that this session's being recorded and will be available to all registered participants within the next few days. It'll be on our YouTube channel. Feel free to share it, please do. And for any of those who might need to step away tonight or would like to share this town hall later, you'll have that recording indefinitely. We'll mail it out after the event to those who have registered. So as I mentioned, we'll be having a brief Q&A at the end of the presentation. So you can use the Q&A feature on the Zoom app to submit your questions, and you can do that at any time. We'll get to your question either later in the session, or if we aren't able to get to it for whatever reason, we will email you a response afterwards to make sure that we answer your questions fully. And just lastly, I want to thank our sponsors for making tonight's event possible. Dr. Bronner's has been a supporter of Animal Outlooks for many years, and we're so grateful. Their support allows us to provide these valuable opportunities to share insights and behind the scenes glimpses into the world of animal protection. So thank you to Dr. Bronner's and its team, who are, I know, all animal advocates just like us and just like everyone on the line now. And I can see we're up to 30 people. Terry from Citrus Heights, hello, and Julia. Good to see you all. Cynthia from Long Island, New York. Wonderful. So, for those who don't know me, I'm Ben Williamson. I am the new executive director of Animal Outlook, and I'm delighted to be hosting tonight's town hall. I realize I'm probably meeting many of you for the first time tonight, so I want to take this opportunity to properly introduce myself. And if you'll permit me to say a little something about my predecessor, Cheryl Leahy, who was with Animal Outlook for 18 years. So Cheryl's been a remarkable servant for farmed animals. She's overseen so many victories to mention that each one could be the subject of its own town hall event. But to name just a few, Cheryl was responsible for the end of nose boning as a common industry practice for male chickens in 2016, the first ever undercover investigation of salmon aquaculture in the United States in 2019, and the strongest ever US appellate decision on animal cruelty and commercial operations in Animal Outlook's Martin Farms case in 2020, and not to mention the $53 million settlement for consumers in Animal Outlook's dairy price fixing lawsuit. So Cheryl's legacy for animals and the mark on the animal protection movement are undeniable. And I'm so happy that she's not going too far. Cheryl will remain on the board of Animal Outlook. And so we can count on Cheryl to be there for animals as she always had been. So I have big boots to fill, and I'm looking forward to the challenge. I've spent the last 13 years working in animal protection myself in both the UK and the United States. So despite my British accent, I've lived in the Los Angeles, California, off and on for the last 10 years. I've been vegan myself since 2009. It's one of the best things I've done in my life for my health, for the planet, and of course for all the animals who I no longer eat. So before joining Animal Outlook, I was the US Director at Compassion World Farming, and before that, I was the Programs Director at World Animal Protection. And I spent the first 7 years of my career at PETA, where I mostly worked with the press and what we would now call the legacy media, news media. So my career has transversed from communications and campaigns and organizational leadership, but I've never deviated from wanting to do the right thing by animals. I'm always guided by a fundamental belief that we can and we will make a difference in the lives of animals whose suffering is so enormous. And for me, it's really the scale and intensity of animal suffering that I think makes it the biggest issue facing humanity today. There are many problems we face, but for me, the gulf of where we are in relation to our relationship with animals and where we need to be is so enormous that there's plenty of work for us all to do. So from my short time at Animal Outlook so far, I've come to had the privilege of overseeing a team that is a dedicated group of talented and experienced professionals, one of whom we'll hear from shortly. Animal Outlook has this incredible community of support. You only need to see the people joining. I know some of you have probably been with Animal Outlook from the COK days, and even long before, and evidenced by all of the dedicated people who take our actions and sign up to our events, and of course, our wonderful donors. So thank you so much for your commitment to changing the world for animals. I look forward to getting to know all of you, and working with you to realize a vision for animals that's not one of utilization, but of liberation, because that surely has to be the end goal. So looking ahead, I'm sure probably some of you want to see how Animal Outlook might change under my leadership. I think there's tremendous potential for Animal Outlook to expand its impact and reach using some of that experience that I mentioned I bring in communications and campaigns. We're at an amazing moment in our organization's history. We'll be celebrating our 30th anniversary in 2025 for next year, a remarkable achievement for any organization. And I want us to build on that impressive history, some of the successes and wins that I mentioned Cheryl has gained over the last few decades. And while developing the innovative approaches to community engagement and advocacy, such as tonight, which was, I have to say, tonight was actually the creation of our dedicated Director of Development, Warren Egersham. So I'm sure many of you know Warren, and he's been around for a while. But thank you, Warren, for organizing tonight's event, and thank you for managing our community of wonderful supporters. So Animal Outlook is, I hope, going to become an even more powerful force for animals over the coming years, with a focus on expanding our reach and having even greater impacts than we already have. But we need your help in order to do that. We can only get so far unless we have the funding and the support needed to really grow our impact. So I'm truly excited about the journey ahead. I'm deeply honored to be leading this organization and to be working with each of you on delivering for animals. You all play an extremely important role in our future. And I'd love to, if I can now, share a little bit more about where Animal Outlook is headed before I turn the floor over to Erin. So what sets Outlook apart for me is our theory of change, our going from undercover investigations, impact litigation, vegan advocacy, and farmer transitions, just to round off the whole conversation. So we don't just document abuse, we use that evidence to drive systematic change through the legal system and then in the court of public opinion. And this approach has led to some remarkable victories, as I said, under Cheryl's leadership, that have transformed the landscape of animal protection. So it's a strategy that I don't think needs changing. It's something that I plan to continue long before. There's been a lot of thought and successes on the back of that strategy. So I'm looking forward to expanding upon that and developing greater impact where I can. But we're innovating all the time. We're a couple of months away from some exciting updates about the pilot project in our farm transitions program, some of you might have heard about, which is obviously transitioning farmers out of animal operations into crop growing instead. So next year, as I mentioned, will be our 30th anniversary, but it's also going to be our biggest year yet for inspiring people to go vegan, because we've created something called the Animal Outlook Network very recently. So if you're looking for opportunities to volunteer or step up your advocacy, or even just ways to talk to your family and friends about animal exploitation that uses cutting-edge behavior change sciences developed by leading US universities that might actually get through to your family and friends, then I encourage you to sign up to animaloutlooknetwork.com. And there, the latest sciences, the training videos. Jenny's done a super job in putting that all together. So please do go to that and please take the actions that Jenny will email you from time to time. So I'm particularly excited to share right now that we have an incredible opportunity to double our impact for animals. So thanks to our generous supporters at Vegan Grants, every donation made tonight and indeed throughout the rest of the year will be matched dollar for dollar. So if you're moved by the work that Erin and I will be talking about, inspired to make a gift, you can visit animaloutlook.org right now and your donation will go twice as far. So thank you for being here and thank you all for what you do for animals and thank you for your commitment to Animal Outlook. Just a reminder about those questions, please do type them into the Q&A. I haven't seen any questions yet, but would love to receive them and Erin and I will be able to get to them. I'm thrilled to introduce you to Erin Wing, Animal Outlook's Deputy Director of Investigations. Welcome, Erin. Erin is an animal rights activist extraordinaire, an undercover investigator who has gained prominence for her groundbreaking work exposing conditions within industrial animal agriculture facilities. As lead investigator for Animal Outlook, Erin has conducted multiple high-impact investigations that have fundamentally changed the conversation around animal agriculture practices in the United States. So one of Erin's notable investigations was her work at Dick Van Dam Dairy, where she documented severe animal welfare violations that led to criminal charges against the facility's owners as well as the workers, because it's always important that this doesn't just fall down the pyramid and that the owners are held accountable for what happens on their watch. Erin's footage revealed cows being hit, kicked, and subjected to extreme neglect, and led to widespread media coverage and public outcry. The investigation resulted in the facility's closure and sparked important discussions about oversight in the dairy industry. And throughout her career, Erin has conducted investigations across various animal agriculture sectors, not just the dairy farms we know about, chicken facilities, and also pig operations. And her work has been instrumental in exposing standard industry practices that many consumers were previously unaware of, such as the separation of mother cows from their calves and the intensive confinement conditions endured by animals on factory farms. Erin's investigations have been featured in major media outlets, including the New York Times, the Washington Post, and CNN, and she's brought crucial transparency to that industry. So often operates behind closed doors, but Erin's footage has been used in numerous documentaries, so getting the word out that way. She's given testimony in legal proceedings and against agricultural facilities for violating animal welfare laws, so on every avenue Erin can. Erin's also a very powerful voice, as we'll hear tonight, in the animal rights movement. Erin regularly speaks at conferences, universities just last week, presenting at NYU, and public events about her experience as an investigator. Because as you'll hear tonight, it's a unique thing that Erin does and her team. So, you know, there aren't too many people who can speak with such authority as Erin does. Erin's advocacy extends beyond just documentation. She works to promote systemic changes in how society treats farmed animals. By collaborating with our legal team and, as I mentioned, the theory of change, Erin ensures that her findings lead to concrete actions, whether through criminal charges or civil penalties. And her work, of course, has led to corporate policy changes and helped push for stronger regulatory oversight of these animal agriculture facilities. And in the short time that I've known Erin, I've been really impressed by her commitment and her willingness to do whatever's right to do by animals. Maybe at a later date, we can come back and talk about some events that have happened only in the last few weeks that I'm particularly proud of Erin for going through and for doing whatever needs to be done for animals. I can say that with some conviction. So here now to talk about her work, her time as an investigator. May I hand it over to Erin Wing?
Thanks, Ben. Yes, I just want to first off share my appreciation to everyone coming out to support Animal Outlook. Gratitude for just your presence here and joining me and Ben and Warren as well for this event where I can share some of the intensely challenging yet rewarding experiences I've had in my time as an undercover investigator and as a manager of investigations with Animal Outlook. I think overall, if I can summarize my general feelings towards the work that I have the privilege of being able to do, is just this feeling of getting up every day in the morning and feeling grateful because I'm in awe that I can do this work and standing here, standing in the presence of other compassionate people and people dedicated to helping animals as much as I am. And being in spaces like this and any time that I can sort of just share space with others who just share this dedication to making the world a better place, I'm exactly where I need to be. And my commitment and connection to animals has actually always been a constant throughout my life. I actually come from a very humble, pretty rough background, and the compassion that I didn't get from humans in my life, I was able to get from my connections with animals. Animals were the only individuals I encountered who always showed me the most kindness, even when they experienced the most mistreatment more often than not. And when I was younger, I was actually introduced early on to um, several instances of abuse and violence that had been leveraged against vulnerable people, humans, animals, and myself included. And I always dreamt of one day being the person to protect others, as I would have liked for there to have been someone out there for that could do that for me. And that urge to protect and be protected extended to myself and all living beings from a very young age. When I was a little girl, actually, my mother had a relationship with a police officer who was in the K-9 unit. And the German Shepherd dog who worked with the officer was named JD. And despite the job that was assigned to JD, he was very patient and affectionate with me, even when I was a child who didn't have a lot of knowledge about how to interact with dogs as large as he was. He was definitely a gentle giant in my presence. So just to give an example of, one of the really life-changing interactions that I had. It was just this one day that we were all at this officer's home, and I saw his canine companion JD chewing a roll of paper towels on the floor. So my first instinct was to rush over to try and take it from him. And that was just because I thought it was dangerous for him to eat. And in reflex, JD ended up nipping at my arm and cutting the skin, and it started bleeding. And myself, being a child at the time, my initial reaction was to panic, and I ran to my mom crying, telling her what happened as my eyes just flooded over with tears that didn't really match the marginal amount of physical pain that I actually felt at the time. And after listening to this dramatic retelling that I was giving my mother, she then proceeded to tell her boyfriend, JD's handler, and he immediately descended on JD to punish him. What he ended up doing was he poured bleach on the bathroom floor and forced JD inside the bathroom and closed the door, locking him inside. And he left him in there for some time to suffer in that small confined space, breathing in toxic fumes. I remember watching this as a child and being absolutely horrified that anyone could do that to another sentient being. When my mother took me aside and started tending to that bite, it suddenly seemed so small and insignificant to me. Really, it was just a little nip, and it wasn't worth JD being tortured in a way that I wouldn't wish on anyone ever. And at that time, I regretted ever making a big deal about it at all. Later on, I learned that from my mother telling me in a later conversation that this was actually a form of punishment that JD experienced often, and she would feel sorry for him and end up letting him out of the bathroom sometimes. So I still have that scar, and it's small and it's faded, but it's still there, and it's just right here on my wrist. And I'm always reminded of JD when I look at it, of how easy it can be for humans to forget how fractured our perspective is on the individual worth of animals. What happened to JD happened in the silence of a locked bathroom that was just filled with his constant cries and whimpers as he scratched at that door, trying desperately to escape, leaving marks and deep grooves in the wood. And I don't know how long his suffering persisted after my mother and I left that situation and she separated from that officer she had that relationship with. I didn't really know the full extent of his suffering at all, of JD's suffering. But that small glimpse into it provided an additional dose of clarity for me to the fraught relationship between the human who used JD for his own benefit and abused him when he saw fit, and the animal at the mercy of such treatment. During one of our most recent investigations of a Holden Farms pig production facility, which was completed by one of our brave former investigators, we exposed the cruel treatment towards unwanted piglets who were gassed to death when they were deemed too small or sick to be raised for slaughter. Piglets the size of about an 8-week-old kitten were placed in sealed boxes filled with carbon dioxide. I remember looking at that footage myself for the first time and seeing the multiple instances of one or two piglets still clinging to life among a pile of dead bodies, gasping for air, their small frames just heaving as they let out these raspy little whines that I'll never forget the sound of as they were fighting for their lives. And when I was watching that footage, I was reminded of JD. What happened to those piglets happened on a pig farm in the middle of nowhere in Minnesota, in the cold darkness of a black box where no one could hear their cries until our brave investigator opened that box up and let what was probably the last bit of light they would see in their short lives shine in on them. Here at Animal Outlook, I've been able to go from being that little girl who felt like I couldn't make a difference to someone fighting for a better future for everyone I share this planet with in one of the most dynamic ways. And I can't express how powerful that feeling is for a person like me. Before I even started doing undercover work, I had absolutely no interactions with farmed animals and I didn't even know what to expect. I just knew that I had to do it. And although the world of animal agriculture was actually so much darker than I thought, in the beginning I still had just this tremendous amount of hope for some reason because I was determined to do everything I could for them to push myself to the limits. And I went into those spaces with confidence, prepared to withstand anything that I came across. And then I was confronted with the harsh reality of the farmed animal experience. I ended up just being shocked by the scale of animal farming. Just thousands of animals packed in cramped, filthy, and barren warehouses and pens and stripped of their individuality and barely provided their most basic needs while being pushed and punished and struck and hit and subjected to all kinds of torment for no reason other than the fact that humans have become accustomed to consuming their flesh. And some would live, but so many of them would be left to die. And in my entire life up until that point, I have never seen so much suffering for any living being to endure so much torment. And I couldn't believe how any of the animals that I encountered during my investigations could even survive or live in those circumstances. What ended up really surprising me the most were the animals themselves and the resilience that was present within them, especially in those animals who were actually brave enough and trusting enough to approach me when I was undercover on farm sites and approaching me with this sense of curiosity and a degree of vulnerability. And the individuals who really affected me were two cows, and I will always bring them up because it's so important to just share these instances of the personalities of these animals coming out because it's so inherent in their being, right? So I usually will mention my friend who had the ear tag 714. She was an all black cow with a white diamond on her forehead. And she approached me one day when I was moving hundreds and hundreds of cows through the milking area for hours. And I was assigned to that duty some days, and I would just perform those tasks just completely disconnected from what I was doing because that was the least painful way for me to get through each day with that certain level of detachment. But I will never forget that cow breaking through that barrier that I had erected around myself. Her just breaking through the crowd and coming up behind me and sniffing my head. And when I noticed her standing there and looking at me, I was shocked at first, but something in me just told me to reach out to her really slowly and gently, not knowing if she would be too scared of me to let me pet her, but she did. And ever since then, during my time when I was still investigating that facility, I would look for her in the crowd, and I would steal these moments with her when no one was looking and pet her whenever I saw her. There was actually another cow at the investigation that Ben mentioned, which was my very last that I conducted at Dick Van Dam Dairy in Southern California. And this cow had the ear tag 1919, and she was extremely charismatic. She was a real personality. She had a way more extroverted energy than I will ever have. I remember the second time we met, and I had my back facing a bunch of cows. And some of these cows, I don't know if I'll ever see them again if I come across them during my time at these facilities. Um, but it was a real surprise when suddenly someone nudged me and nudged my back and pushed me with their head. And I'm a pretty small person, so she just about knocked me over. Then I turn around and I see that it's her. It's the cow with the ear tag 1919. I remembered her. And I saw that she was trying to get my attention when I was so locked into my job once again. And I remember seeing her ear tag and saying to her, "Oh, it's you, my friend," and feeling so much joy in that moment. Even though it was my very last investigation, I was feeling so much pain. Not a single experience of these animals in this system that humans have created for them can be diminished. And those interactions I carry with me with that concept and that and knowing that truth in my heart. And no one investigation is same as is the same as the next. With every investigation, we reveal time and time again that while the oppressive design of animal exploitation is seemingly fixed, it's ingrained in our culture all around the world. The uniqueness of the experiences of these animals is important to share, and it has never been more apparent than right now that we have a duty to keep telling their stories. About 5 or 6 years ago, just for additional backstory here, I was a new undercover investigator, ending my first investigation and leaving a chicken farm contracted to Tyson Foods. And I was crying as I was driving away from the farm site where I had documented some of the most brutal abuse I'd ever seen, especially for someone just starting out doing undercover work. And I was staring at the rearview mirror, just thinking of all the young birds that I was leaving behind. Curiously enough, just last year, actually, we released a new investigation of a Tyson contracted chicken farm just a couple of hours away from where my first investigation took place. And on that farm site, young baby birds were treated with no regard for their well-being, forced to suffer through the most gruesome injuries and food and water deprivation so severe that small chicks were documented jumping up in desperation just to reach the water sources that were right outside of their reach. And those tiny birds were struggling to survive as the manager and owner of the farm turned a blind eye to their suffering. To anyone else who has had the opportunity or the ability to watch that heartbreaking evidence from that investigation, those conditions were shocking to see. But unfortunately, it wasn't really a surprise to me that the birds that were documented there were experiencing mistreatment in ways I hadn't even seen during my own investigation over half a decade ago. What did come as a surprise to me was the justice we were able to secure for those birds when the owner of that farm pled guilty to 2 counts of animal cruelty with 9 animal cruelty charges filed against the manager of the farm. And the farm itself is shut down. So while we rejoice in those victories, as the years go on, we face more and more adversity. It's getting harder and harder to document the struggles that farmed animals face. But just as the industry adapts over time and fortifies their protections and strengthens the walls that keep billions of animals trapped, my resolve is strengthened to adapt and evolve, to push through and do everything in my power to continue challenging that complex machine designed to systematically torture and abuse everyone involved within it, to still be there for the animals and try my hardest to do so. This massive animal agriculture industry, with all its connections, that has lobbied for laws to increase protections for their businesses, influence the perspective of others to believe that consuming animal products is the only way to live, that has monetized the oppression and suffering of sentient beings and normalized it, wants us to grow weary. They want us to grow tired of challenging them, to shy away from opening up that black box where piglets are gassed to death, to not think twice about the nature of our relationship to animals, to hesitate to open up that door riddled with scratches from animals desperate to break out, to balk at the idea that those beings we believed we had dominion over have a right to live free from oppression. But I am a part of an organization that works tirelessly, and I feel that we're tenacious, especially myself. We have this grit to continue on. Even when we're confronted by a series of closing doors, we chart our own path forward and we persist. And that's why I know I'm right where I need to be, because despite the obstacles, I've always been determined to keep going for them. There's always a way. There's always more to know, room to grow, room to learn, and we do all we can to expand our knowledge, learn the industry inside and out, so that when the opportunity comes to expose their brutality, we make the most of it and pursue justice for the animals. This industry is going to go through great lengths, as they've always done, to prevent people from seeing these animals as individuals, to see that they are capable of feeling, of experiencing joy and pain and emotions and inner lives similar to ours. Because if consumers did see this, the ease with which people have fallen into consuming them and permitting their torment and oppression would be impossible to reconcile with. So they do everything to sever that connection. And we're the ones that bridge that gap. We show the pain, the sorrow, and share the rare instances of happiness that they experience. We show every moment and we say loudly and strongly to those who turn away, to those blinded by the propaganda, to see them, to see these animals as they are, see them as what we have forced them to become, and all the authentic selves that they still cling to, hoping to be free, to express all this joy and hope and love that lies inside of them all. And we hope that in seeing them, we unravel and reveal more about ourselves as a society, and we help people to redefine who they want to be and what role they want to play in this system, to perpetuate it or work together to dismantle it. For each farmed animal, the footage we document is their shared and separate reality. They each have their own story to tell. And the way that I like to envision and just think about and sit with my role um, in this journey is to think of us as the keepers of their epitaphs, the vessel through which those stories are told. And with all they have to say to us, I hold in my heart for them to those piglets behind the concrete walls of pig farms, to chickens trapped inside dark warehouses across the country, to JD, to all the animals we say collectively with each step we take toward that brighter future for them, a land where sanctuary isn't just a privilege afforded to the lucky few. With every investigation and venture into that darkness, I carry these words in my heart for them, that I see their pain. I see them, and I will never forget them, and I'll make sure that they're never forgotten. And I'll never stop fighting until every single individual is recognized as someone worth saving. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Thank you so much, Erin. I never fail to be surprised and impressed at how you can be so motivated and inspirational in the face of all the trauma and all the horrific things that you've seen. You seem to use every instance of cruelty and abuse as leverage, as a motivation for continuing your fight. And your fight is so deeply personal. It's so obvious when we listen to you and hear the individual stories of love and friendship that you've managed to experience with these animals because you've been so close to them. And as well, the suffering that you've seen, you turn all of that into just some amazing positive energy. And it's infectious. I mean, I'm inspired by listening to you. I'm sure there's a lot of people on the line who are inspired as well and motivated to do even more for animals as a result of listening to your stories. So thank you so much. I also appreciate, these are not easy things to talk about, let alone endure. So thank you for being vulnerable. Thank you for opening yourself up and letting us live through your experiences with these animals and you know, your own individual circumstances, for offering all of yourself to animals. It's really appreciated and helps us tell more of their story through your eyes. So it's really wonderful how good a role model you are for this cause. Just before we get to some questions, because we've had a lot of our say, and I want to get some of the great questions that we've had. I just want to take a moment to remind people that we have a matching gift challenge on at the moment. So all of the work that Erin's been describing is only possible through donations from our supporters. So if you'd like to support the investigations like Erin's, if you log on to animaloutlook.org now, you'll find our donate page. You won't lose the Zoom call. We can still go through the questions and you can still hear from Erin. And you can make that donation, and then your gift will be matched dollar for dollar. So there's never been a better time this year to donate. Now is the time to make your gift go twice as far to support our investigators in the field. So, and I just, on that note, I want to take a moment to recognize two donations that we've had in. Terry Forrester, thank you, Terry, so much for your gift. And Alan Heyman, Alan gave $1,000 today. So thank you so much, Alan. That's really appreciated. Obviously motivated by the work that we do. Very, very grateful for your gift, which will now be $2,000 matched by vegan grants. So thank you for that. And Erin, I think we could probably take some questions now. I'd like to stick to the theme of investigations. We have had some questions about animal outlook work in general, and if we have time at the end, I will come back to those. But I'd like to stick to the topic of investigations. So, Erin, maybe we can. Well, firstly, actually, people have been very interested in what happened with JD. I think that JD and the officer. So, as much as you can tell us about JD, because obviously that was a very harrowing story. Do you know how they got on in the end?
I don't actually, and there's a lot to be said about that, and I'll try to keep it to be very succinct, but it's so reminiscent of what it's like to do investigations work, right? I think the the framework for, my journey started with that incident. And that core memory for me is that I don't know what ended up happening to him. And whenever we conduct undercover investigations work, we don't know exactly what will end up happening to those animals. I didn't know, some of the cows that I encountered with the ear tag 714. I still think about her to this day, but I don't know what happened to her. I don't know whether she lived or died shortly after. And I have a sense of, where she might have ended up, sadly, and it wouldn't have been, a happy ending for her. And so often for so many animals, there are so few happy endings, especially within the framework of how we view them in our society, and it takes a lot of work to shift out of that framework. But um, that's why I do the work that I do, and that's why we're all here, I think, because we believe that it is possible to shift our perspective, and we need to, for the sake of a lot of animals that we don't know where they're going to end up, and we want to give them more happy endings and safety and sanctuary.
Yeah, absolutely. And they live on through you and your stories and your help for animals just like them. So yeah, we'll take some questions. Just want to acknowledge Evan's gifts. Thank you so much, Evan, for your donation of $250. And as well, Bonnie Carlson. Thank you very much, Bonnie, for your gift as well. Please, if you go to animaloutlook.org/donate, that's where you can make a gift just like Bonnie and Evan as well. So, sticking on the theme of investigations, maybe if we start with kind of the process, and I know you won't want to give away too much here because it's already a risky enough job as it is without animal ag knowing too much of our tactics. But if you could just tell us what you can, because it's fascinating. We all want to know how it works. What are some of the things that people think they are getting into when they become investigators, but they're least prepared for when they end up in the field? And yeah, what are some of the misconceptions about this role?
I think maybe one of the things that is not too crazy or overwhelming to hear about um, is that it's very easy to forget who you are. And it's such a it's kind of vague. It's kind of, what does that mean? And it's just some people think that it's really easy to just go into these facilities and I don't know, just continue to be you, because you're just there temporarily, right? And eventually you'll leave and you adopt the persona of a worker, a farm worker, but you know why you're really there, right? But when those days turn to weeks, turn to months, and sometimes in some cases you don't know when it's going to end, and you get so acclimated to just the day to day. It's so hard when you're seeing suffering, when you're seeing abuse, when you're seeing cruelty on a daily basis in some cases, to just remember yourself, because you get so wrapped into who you have to be for the animals, and then not being able to really, it's I think some people might even get this urge to just, oh, I maybe I can save one or at least one, and it's just, having that level of resilience and knowing that um you're there for a purpose, and remembering that purpose, and enduring through everything that you see, knowing that you can't help them right then and there, but in the long run, it's all worth it in the end. It's hard to remember that, and it's hard to, keep track of yourself, and so many people, run into that risk of losing who they are. It's so hard. So yeah, I would say that's the thing that sort of comes to mind for me that most people don't really think about.
Yeah, yeah, I would have had no idea myself. Part two of Debbie's question was, and this again may be difficult to put your finger on it, but out of the number of people who apply for the job, what is the percentage that go on to be investigators?
I would, I mean, honestly, I would say that's a very small percentage. So few people, I mean, I really admire when people even express interest in doing it because I think there's a lot of knowledge within the movement, within animal advocacy work, even of how difficult it is to do undercover work. Um, and it's great that people have that passion um, to put themselves in that position, but so few people are the right person for it or can withstand it and put themselves through that. It takes a specific type of person. Um, and yeah, I think in my case, because I can only speak to myself, right? For what was the thing that carried me through was just that idea of resilience. And I like to just separate and move away from the concept of, oh, if you're an investigator, it means you're a really, really strong person. And if you're not, then maybe you're not strong enough. And just that dichotomy of strength and weakness. I don't like to think of it in that way. It's just a matter of, this concept of resilience. And it's something that I was able to cultivate because I had already experienced so much and I went into undercover work just having this solidarity with animal suffering. And I think in some cases, maybe it takes a little bit of that dashed into what I would think is someone who might be able to go the extra mile and be able to put themselves through that really difficult work.
Yeah, understandable. And if anyone does want to be an undercover investigator, I know we're always seeking people. We always want for people to apply, just because, as Erin said, it's hard to get that right person. So do have a look at our website. If you think you've got what it takes to be an undercover investigator, it's tough, but you may do. So please do have a think about it. I just want to make a couple of more acknowledgements of some gifts that are coming through because we're really truly so grateful for this. Julia Cunningham, Cynthia Yablonsky, Judy Slate, and Jeannie Walter. Thank you for your gifts on the line. I know I've seen those names. Also, Mary Johnson just came through. Thank you, Mary. It's really appreciated. This work, it means so much to all of us, and we're so extremely grateful for your support, and of course, it helps us help animals even more. So sticking with the theme of investigations, Erin, maybe you can tell us how long does a typical undercover investigation last, and do you, as the investigator, have to participate in any of the tasks of the facility that you're investigating?
Ooh, in terms of timing, um, again, that's one of those things that sometimes it's just up in the air. It depends on what's happening at any given facility. We can never anticipate, right? Because we don't know because it's not transparent. We don't know what it's like in those places until we're actually in there. And that's why undercover investigations, I feel, is so important because we need that knowledge. We need that knowledge for a number of reasons. Undercover investigations have uncovered so many things that have been happening that in facilities in animal agriculture in different sectors of animal ag that um, go on a daily basis and people have never seen it and don't even know. Um, and it's so important to reveal those practices. Um, and then, sometimes it takes time um, to acclimate to a facility to be there and you only see what you see and we can't manifest things or make things happen or something like that. But usually, you know, um, it doesn't take long. It never takes long. I remember when I was investigating facilities, um, at least two of them. When I started working there, I'd been there for at a couple of these places for about a month, and I didn't see any cruelty. I didn't see any workers hitting animals, and I thought, well, maybe for once I won't have to see that. Maybe for once I won't have to document that. And it's not like I wish for it. you know. I don't think any investigator does, really, to see any of the animals suffer. But sadly, anytime I thought maybe this place might be different, you know, the whole bad apples concept that the industry likes to tell consumers, it's not true because every single investigation I conducted, eventually there would be some instance of cruelty. So yeah, that answers your first question. I don't know. I can get into the standard practices as well, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think people would be interested to know, do you, as an investigator, in order to not to blow your cover, do you have to participate in, you know, acts of abuse? Some would argue that the animals being there is cruelty enough, but do you have to participate in what's going on, what the cruelty that you find?
So at Animal Outlook, we don't participate in any forms of animal cruelty, such as, you know, violence and overt violence, right? Kicking, hitting, using an object to hit an animal or strike an animal, for reasons that are outside of the scope of the daily procedures of a facility. What's interesting to me is that the standard practices cause pain to animals, and that's routine procedure. And those are things that, you know, as an investigator, I've had to perform standard practice procedures. And people, I don't know how it doesn't really click with some people, and maybe it's because they've never really seen the footage and they haven't seen what the animals have to endure. But for just mutilations and things like that, that occur in pig farms to young piglets, where parts of their bodies are cut away without them being administered any anesthetic. Um, if you took a cat to a vet and they started operating on the cat without giving them any anesthesia beforehand, anyone would consider that animal cruelty. And yet that happens on farm sites across the country where they're cutting away parts of their body, and they are sensible to all that pain. I would consider that, you know, cruelty, cruel to the animal, but that's standard practice. Another thing is burning away the horn tissue of young calves, which I was able to document on one of the dairy farms I investigated. And just to see that in practice, it was so horrific. And at that farm site, they didn't administer any anesthesia to the calves there, before putting them through that really brutal experience. And to see it just firsthand, it's awful. It sticks with me. And to think that's just routine farming procedure is just mind-boggling to me. So yeah,
Yeah. No, thank you for that. I mean, you describe, a lot of acts of cruelty, and I think what Emily, part of her question, and Jeannie and Judy are all kind of wondering is, how do you cope? How do you keep your sanity? How do you stay positive? How are you able to mentally deal with, seeing all of the horrific suffering of animals? What do you do to support yourself?
so when I was in the field, I don't believe I did practice taking care of myself in that way, because I was so locked into just being whoever I needed to be, and just locking into to the daily work and it's just it's a way to get through each day, I think. And it's a natural way of the brain and just protecting itself. Um, uh, Actually, from one of the investigations I conducted at a um, salmon hatchery, which was one of the investigations you mentioned earlier, the first ever US-based salmon aquaculture investigation. Um, Towards the end of it, when it was, you know, one of the last days, and throughout the entire day, I had witnessed and documented workers just hurling live fish over into tanks and throwing them up in the air and letting them fall on the ground, repeatedly over and over again, just essentially torturing the fish at the facility. At the end of the day, I ended up looking into a bin that was filled with live fish, but there wasn't any water in the bin, so they were slowly suffocating to death. And that was one of the ways that they killed the fish there who were unwanted for whatever reason, maybe ill or injured or deformed or something like that. And the manager at the facility, he saw me looking into the bin filled with these fish that who were slowly dying, and he told me, yeah, it used to really bum me out the way we killed them, but over the years you kind of get desensitized. And he just so accurately summarized what the experience is for farm workers at those facilities. And it sort of ties into what the experience for an undercover investigator is that you do get desensitized, and that's just a way of, the brain just protecting itself. And I think that that was sort of, what I was going through during my time undercover. Now I try to really take care of myself and focus on mental health care and self-care. It's so very important, especially putting in um, more years into the movement, into animal advocacy work, and specifically in the work that I do. Yeah, I definitely wish I had done that and realized that more in the past, but you can always start somewhere. And I think, in order to increase our longevity for fighting for animals, we have to also, give that care and that love to ourselves. And it makes all the difference, I think.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And you now in a leadership position in the movement with all that experience, hopefully you can impart that on other investigators as they're coming through. So we've got time for one last question, and I'm going to make it kind of a big one. Evan Jane Chris asks, how can we make changes in the agribusiness industry when they're so powerful and wealthy? When you've been in the farms yourself and you've been studying hours and hours of footage, you must be thinking like, how can we do this when it's just you or a couple of people with a camera? How are we going to win this fight when it's so big? And what have you come up with as given all the hours that you put into thinking about this question?
Yeah, we can even look at current events. Um, the way they do things, it just is so antithetical to progress. And it's just so opposed to positive change in our world. And because of the way that they do business, because they refuse to change, right? They fight tooth and nail for things to stay the exact same because that's where they rake in the most profits, right? In terms of animal agribusiness as a whole, you can see how they're sort of, they end up imploding in some cases. I mean, look at the avian influenza outbreak that's just ravaging California and so many other places in the world and in this country alone. Um, and it's in large part due to the way that they have always done things. And I think over the years, especially, the difference from 10 years ago or 7 years ago in my case when I first started working in animal advocacy work, there's been a huge difference, a huge shift. And I see when I keep my checks on, the industry, the same way that they're keeping checks on us is that they are scared. Um, they're concerned. Dairy sales are plummeting because there's so many other alternatives, and the more undercover investigations that come out, the more that the truth of the way that they operate is more accessible to people because more people have access to the internet. More people can just, look up what is dairy farming actually like, and they see so many different, a myriad of different results, whereas the however many years ago where we just had TVs, right, and we would see the beef, it's what's for dinner ad on TV, and they had a foothold there, but now the climate is so different, and I think there's opportunity there. I'm not too concerned. I don't think of them as very powerful. I think that we don't recognize our own power enough because that's where the change is going to come through, is when we recognize that we have the power to push for that change in whatever way we can, and we all can in our own separate ways. And this is what I choose to do is the undercover investigations work, managing investigations. That's my place.
Thank you, Erin, and what a marvelous place you've fashioned for yourself as well. You're an inspiration. I mean, every time I hear you talk, I get more motivated even to work and do what I do. So, thank you for sharing with us your experience tonight. Thank you everyone who stayed on the line this long. Really appreciate it. If we didn't get to your question, we have your contact details, we have your questions, so we'll message you in the next couple of days and just let you know more about Animal Outlook, what we're doing. Before we wrap up tonight, I want to remind everyone our matching gift challenge is on for the rest of 2024. So if you weren't able to donate tonight but want to do so this month, please do, and your gift will be matched, go twice as far. So again, a very sincere extensive gratitude to Vegan Grants for their incredible support on the match, as well as to Dr. Bronner's, whose generous sponsorship made tonight's event a reality. Thank you to Erin for your vulnerability, for your openness, for your passion. Really great to see you and to share this with the support with all of the people on the line today and all of our supporters. And thank you, dear supporters, for all of you have stuck with us for the hour. Really appreciate it. It's so lovely to hear from you. That chat has been so wonderful to read and to engage with, and just love seeing these names and all of these opinions and thoughts. So thank you for your support. If you're not able to donate, even just your strength of feeling and warmth and notes of appreciation go so far, and we'll be sure to pass them along to the rest of the team. So thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your evening, and happy holidays, and we'll likely see you in 2025. Goodbye.